Sebastian, this is, I don't know if you can see us or not, but this is coming from Colonel Doug Macgregor.
Listen, I think it's a serious mistake to sit here and conflate the conditions that brought us to Germany and Japan with the conditions that brought us to Afghanistan. And there is no existential threat, not on the scale that we faced from either the Soviets or during World War II. The notion that pouring more Christian Europeans in U.S. or British uniform into a Muslim country will somehow or another endear us to Muslims, that we are going to export goodness to them at gunpoint.
I never said that.
I think it's a fundamentally flawed position, and I absolutely disagree with the notion that Afghanistan is somehow or another a wonderful platform from which to launch anything. Remember that the towers were destroyed by Egyptian and Saudi Arabs, very wealthy, educated people who planned and organized in Hamburg, Germany, and then completed their training inside the United States and launched the attacks from within our borders. So the notion that we have to put 100,000 troops on the ground in Afghanistan to somehow or another stop that doesn't hold up to closer scrutiny.
If I may respond here, I never said that anybody's going to love us in that part of the world. One of my fields is strategic communications, and I don't think sending white Christian soldiers into that area is going to make anybody love us. But when it comes to the existential threat, let me say two things. Number one, Al-Qaeda did something the Soviet Union was never able to do. Khrushchev may have banged his shoe on the table at the New York headquarters and said, "We will bury you," but he never killed Americans on American soil. Al-Qaeda killed 3,000 people in 102 minutes.
But Sebastian, Al-Qaeda's not in Afghanistan anymore. They're in, even Jim Jones, the National
But do we
Security
think if we withdraw, Afghanistan's not going to be... Look, yes, the people who did 9/11 were Saudis, 15 of them were Saudis, and some Egyptians. But where was the plan approved? Where did Khalid Sheikh Mohammed go to get approval for his plan? Well, he went to Afghanistan. Well, and that's the remarkable truth.
I mean, you're right.
That's the truth of it.
You're right, Doctor, in the sense that you know, they will take advantage of any potential operating base that they can establish. And yes, I mean, we were very successful in routing them from that safe haven that they had shortly after 9/11. The question then becomes, though, I think that perhaps KT was leading towards, is if at this stage of the game, that safe haven no longer exists in Afghanistan, but Al-Qaeda is functioning in Yemen, it's functioning in Sudan, it's functioning in Indonesia, it's all over. And it's headquartered in Pakistan. Should we have, and this goes out to both of you, should we have perhaps a more nimble, more flexible policy of looking at our national security issues, the critical concerns that we have, and should we be able to realign faster than we seem to be capable of, and saying, oh, 8 years on is not what it was after 9/11. Do we need to refocus? And I understand what you're saying, Doctor, about Afghanistan and about the greater threat, and sure, if we leave, what happens? But take it at this point. Is there value, and do you think there was any effort during the course of the discussions for the Afghan war strategy in the administration to do something radical and say perhaps Afghanistan no longer plays that strategic role that we thought it did?
But Pakistan might. And if so, how does Afghanistan relate to Pakistan? And, you know, Rory Stewart, the man who walked all the way across Afghanistan, he said that in comparing Pakistan to Afghanistan, which is the greater strategic threat, he said it's like you walk into a room and you see a kitty cat and you see a tiger. And so you start beating the kitty cat because you don't know how to beat the tiger. And the kitty cat is Afghanistan and the tiger is Pakistan.
Let me express it even more strongly. Yes, flexibility and being nimble is important, but it's worse than that. I've been following this stuff since the early 90s, and what's shocking for me is after the end of the Cold War, even after 9/11, and now that I live in Washington, even now with a new administration, nobody does grand strategy in this town. It's an embarrassment. Everybody is controlled by their in-tray. Everybody is under the tyranny of their Outlook inbox. We don't think long term. We don't have the statesmanship of the Churchills, the Adenauers, the Reagans, the Thatchers, the de Gaulles. We are always putting out brush fires. I think you're right. Pakistan's of far more concern than Afghanistan. What's going on in the Sahel, in North Africa, far more serious than what's going on in other parts of the world, even in North Korea.
So, but Sebastian, then if I can interrupt, how does Afghanistan factor into all this? I completely agree with you. I think that if you're a commander-in-chief, you've got to weigh all those. It's not just all about Afghanistan. It's about Afghanistan and Pakistan. And even then, it's also about Somalia and Yemen. And then even the bigger picture, it's the relations that we have with Iran, where we're going to see a crisis within 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
How does it factor into it? It factors into it in many ways, not just operationally or strategically. There's a huge symbolic value to Afghanistan. Why? Because until we went in there in October 2001, what was Afghanistan? It was a fundamentalist, Salafi theocracy. It was the beginning of a caliphate. Now, our special operators, 200 of them, amazing brave men, along with the Northern Alliance, wiped that theocracy out of Kabul. But we have to make sure that this very symbolic seed, this concept, the heart of the proto-caliphate that bin Laden wants to see become a global power, is not recreated.
Yeah,
we cannot afford that.
But Sebastian, let's say we're even under wildly optimistic assessments that we end up being successful in Afghanistan. If we're not also successful in Pakistan, then who cares? Because Pakistan is the country where Al-Qaeda is. Pakistan is a country with nuclear weapons. Right. Pakistan is the crossroads of where terrorism and nuclear weapons seem to always come together.
Well, also, I would argue that it doesn't matter. I mean, we could be successful in both places. We're facing an enemy that they don't care. They are going to go wherever they can operate. So my concern is that we may not still be understanding this enemy the way we need to. And Colonel, I mean, any thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think we need to practice economy of enemies. We have
pick your fights.
Yeah, we have a bad habit of walking in and declaring everyone that we don't like an enemy. We did that in Iraq, and we fought for many, many years against hundreds of thousands of people who were never the enemy. We can't afford to do that sort of thing in Afghanistan. Most of these millions of Pashtun are not interested in Al-Qaeda. They're not interested in providing anything to Al-Qaeda. There's also a lot of evidence that there's a great deal of bad blood between them. The issue is that the Pashtun movement inside Afghanistan is supported by the Pakistani military because they will not accept this Indian-allied government and the Karzai regime. We can't support Karzai and expect anything good to happen.
Okay, so
you're coming back to the Indian equation.
Right.
Yeah. That's the first thing. And the second
but
thing,
you
which
really
I think
think India is on its way to move into Afghanistan? I mean, the Pakistanis, they are so paranoid. They really think that we leave, India moves in, they're surrounded.
No. I think the Pakistanis are confident that if we are not there, that the Pashtun that they support will be successful. I don't think, quite frankly, how the Afghans, Uzbeks, Tajiks, Hazara, and Pashtun govern themselves is very relevant to us.
I agree.
Our only concern is what Dr. Gorka mentioned earlier, making it abundantly clear there's a red line. If you are hosting Al-Qaeda or anyone like them, then you risk destruction from the air. It will come down on you.
We're going to lose Dr. Gorka in 1 second, so I just want to ask a question to both of you. The British general, the counterinsurgency general, has just come out about a month ago and said, with the new counterinsurgency manual from Great Britain, he said two things. He said, what we should do is go around with bags of gold. That's the quote, bags of gold. And he said, and we should deal with people who have blood on their hands, and we should, tribe by tribe, elder by elder, provincial leader by provincial leader, we should go and buy friends. Now, what do you both think of that? I mean, you both have mentioned that Karzai is corrupt, incompetent. So what happens if, forget America's military presence there, what about America's, shall we say, clandestine presence there? Can we go around and buy friends?
Let me try and bridge this shrinking gulf between myself and the Colonel. I think the fact is, I don't want to see American soldiers have to secure Afghanistan. But right now, that's our only option. Stage 2 is to make sure the Afghans, the Uzbeks, the Hazara, the Pashtun take responsibility for those territories, or at least understand, as the Colonel said, there are very clear red lines in the ground. We have to start doing that by spreading the bags of gold. However, not like the State Department, not like the CPA did in Iraq and Afghanistan many years ago, which is just wash it around with whoever says they're capable of giving us what we need. We have to identify those tribes and those leaders who have the capacity, who have the Peshmergas, who have the local militias, who can do it. And remember one thing in that part of the world, people do not stay bought. You have to buy them now, and every springtime you have to buy them again.
On the installment plan, you really have to keep making monthly.
You have to until they understand that the red lines truly are red lines. And one last point, because we do represent freedom and liberty, and America is a unique country in the world, we must not deal with the likes of Hekmatyar. The people who have the most blood on their hands have to be made an example of. So let's be selective about who gets our gold.
Dr. Gorka, thank you. Listen, we're going to unfortunately have to wrap this up, the live remote from Washington, D.C., but we certainly appreciate you coming in. Dr. Gorka, a fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and we hope that you'll agree to return to the show at some point.